Hello and welcome back to That History Dude. Today we are going to go over the MacAlpin Dynasty, also referred to as the Alpinid Dynasty. These were rulers of a family beginning with Alpin himself that ruled over the kingdoms of Dál Riata, the kingdoms of Pictlin or Pictavia, as it was sometimes referred to in historical sources, or simply as King of the Picts. Eventually, over the centuries, from the early medieval ages into the mid-medieval ages, it would come to be known as the Kingdom of Alba. And then from the Kingdom of Alba, the title would then be changed to the Kingdom of Scots, and then until late medieval ages, Kingdom of Scotland. As I stated before, the progenitor of the Alpinid dynasty, or the MacAlpins, is Alpin. He was first a king of Dál Riata, inheritor from his father and his grandfather before him, and so on and so forth. Dál Riata was a Gallic kingdom. The Gaels, they came from Ireland, settled in Northern Ireland and the Western Isles, known as the Hebrides. In this kingdom, they obviously intermarried with the other Pictish kingdoms in the surrounding area of Scotland, such as Fortru, Surson, Moray. Alpine, however, we do not know exactly how he had claims to Fortru. We do know, or suspect, I should say, that his grandmother, it was either his grandmother or his mother, had claims to the kingdom of Fortru. Which then brings us to Kenneth. This is Kenneth MacAlpin. He was king of Dál Riata and of the Picts. He conquered and united Fortru and Moray and Dál Riata. Now, there's some speculation as to why it was united. Why did the Gaels move eastward? During this time period, you have the beginnings of the Viking invasions. And the Vikings first hit the Western Isles. Life in the Isles was untenable. It was violent. It was horrific. The people that lived there did not want to live there. And so they migrated. They migrated east into the once former kingdom of Fortru, where the Picts were. The Gaels would completely take over eastern Scotland and exert their culture into the land. Any and all information that we might have had of the Picts is gone. Their culture, their language, all of it is gone. We simply just don't know what their Celtic language was or their customs. The customs and the traditions and culture of the kingdoms of the Picts comes from Dál Riata, comes from the Gaels, comes from Ireland. Kenneth united the two kingdoms, either through opportunity or simply because, the Norse were kicking them out of Dál Riata, pushing them eastward, inland. We don't exactly know the reasons, but he was the first king, united king of Dál Riata and the Picts. Now, after his death, using the laws of Tanistry in succession, his son did not immediately become king. It was his brother, Donald the First MacAlpin, King of the Picts. Now, I titled him as King of the Picts because by the time of his reign, Dál Riata had been completely consumed by the Vikings. And for all intents and purposes, the historical sources also state that they dropped the title of King of Dál Riata and simply left the King of the Picts because the Gaels themselves, who inhabited the kingdoms of Fortru and Moray and united them under the title of King of the Picts, they consider themselves Picts. They didn't consider themselves as Gaels per se, at least not in the sense of the Irish Gael. They were something entirely different by this point, even though they didn't want to admit it to themselves. But Donald was the second king of the MacAlpin Dynasty. Now, after his death, we have down here Constantine. Constantine I was king of the Picts. He was the son of Kenneth. Now, before I get into Constantine's reign, I do want to point out Kenneth also had two other daughters. His first daughter, now, again, this is in Gaelic. I cannot promise you pronunciation. Maelmur, Ingen Kenneda. Maelmur, daughter of Kenneth. She first married Flanshina, king of Mead, who was an Irish lord, an Irish king. But he died in battle. And so she remarried to Eadfinlaith MacNeill, who was a high king of Ireland. Ead is the Gaelicized form of Hugh. So it would be Hugh Finlaith MacNeill, High King of Ireland, and he was part of the, obviously, O'Neill dynasty, or MacNeill. And he died in 879, and she died in 913, but not before having children who would go on and to be part of the O'Neill dynasty in Ireland. There was an unknown daughter who married Rún ap Arthurgo, who was king of Strathclyde. He was the son of Arthgal ap Dinfinwall, king of Altclut. Now, the kingdom of Altclut was a small kingdom in the southwestern region of today's Scotland, where Galloway is. Altclut was the capital of the kingdom, and also the name of the kingdom. It was destroyed and completely devastated by the Vikings. So by the time of Rún's reign, they had restructured the kingdom into Strathclyde. They moved the capital city to Gowan, and the entire kingdom had just been overhauled after the destruction from the Vikings. Together, they would have a son, Eokid Abrun, who was the king of Strathclyde and also the sixth co-king of the Picts. He was ruler of Alba along with his cousin Garrick. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Back to Constantine. So with Constantine I, as king of the Picts, and Arthgoap Diefenwall, king of Altclut, tensions were high between the two kingdoms. Now, to ease those tensions, Rune did marry Constantine's sister, and they were brother-in-laws. Rune, it was also suspected, wanted to be king faster and wanted to ease tensions with his neighbor, being he married, his neighbor's sister. And Constantine was well inclined to keep the peace. Constantine initiated the assassination of Rune's father, Arthga. Not much else is said about that issue. There weren't any raids or any issues at all between the two kingdoms during the reign of Constantine, from what I could find. Aside from the occasional Viking raids on both of their kingdoms. The peace was kept. And I honestly do believe that it was at the behest of Rune, where Rune asked for Constantine's help to kill his father and made him king, and the peace was there. It was lasting, at least for this generation. Constantine was killed in a Viking raid. And when he was killed, the kingdom of Alba, or kingdom of the Picts, as it was still called during this time, was then inherited by his brother, Aed Whitefoot MacAlpin, king of the Picts, who lived from 838 to 878. Now, Aed is a Gaelicized form of Hugh, and he did not reign for very long. If I can go down here real quick, I have the regnal dates of all the kings of Alba. In the portraits up on my chart, I have their approximate birth dates and their death dates. I have regnal dates listed separately here. And as you can see, Aed Whitefoot, he reigned for 1 year. Aed was basically, if you're an American and you understand the term a lame duck president that just sits there and holds office for and does nothing and just fills time. That's what Aed was. He just filled the space. He was assassinated by Garrick in a conspiracy. Garrick, if we go all the way back over here, this is Garrick. Now, there's a lot of mystery surrounding Garrick. Half the sources think that he was Donald's son. Half the sources think that he was a cousin of Donald's through another brother of Alpine or some such. We don't actually know how Garrick is related to the MacAlpin family. We do know that Donald was his mentor, that Garrick was his ward. Now, just being someone's ward does not mean that you are their son, because nobles exchanged wards all the time for tutelage, for ransom, for whatever multitude of reasons. But again, there's also no evidence to the contrary. And under the laws of succession, it also allows for adult males of the family, no matter their line of succession. As long as they're an adult male of the MacAlpin Dynasty, they were considered eligible claimants to be king. But this is where it gets tricky. Why was he a co-king? Now, he was a co-king. I named him number 5 because he reigned as king first. He was co-king with Ealhcad ab Rún, the son of Rún and that unknown daughter of Kenneth. So why would they be co-kings? And why would Garrick not just be a king by himself? It's stated and thought that maybe Garrick did not have the support of all the nobles. Maybe Garrick was, in fact, related to the MacAlpin family by marriage and not by blood. There are many speculations as to how he could have fit in. Maybe Garrick was the son-in-law of Donald. We just don't have the information from this time period in the sources. We just don't know. Maybe Garrick used Ealhcad's strength, as he was king of Strathclyde, and he was the grandson of Kenneth, used his ties to then become a co-king of the Picts. Again, these are all possibilities of how Garrick became a co-king. But one thing is certain is that he could not be king by himself. He needed the help of Ealhcad. And for that gives us an idea of how far removed he was from the actual main family. So, I do have Garrick, as I said, and then we moved on to Ealhcad. And as I said, he was the co-ruler of Alba with Garrick. He died in 889, but not before Donald II MacAlpin, who by this point, under Donald, the people of Alba, they officially changed their title from, instead of being king of the Picts, to being king of Scots. And they had officially changed the name of the kingdom to Alba. So you can have King of Alba or King of Scots. They were interchangeable up until the Dunkeld. Now, Donald usurped the throne from Ealhcad and Garrick, from these two, as I previously stated. Donald had apparently finally matured, had finally gathered a power base, and from what I read, a lot of civil wars and raids were happening during this time period, which a lot of the peasantry did not like the rule of Garrick and Ealhcad, and they welcomed Donald, as he was the son of a previous king, Constantine. So, Donald lived from about 862 to 900 when he was killed in battle by Vikings. Some sources say led by Harold Fairhair in a raid. Now, after Donald dies, his cousin, Constantine II, becomes king. Now, Constantine made a lot of savvy moves, and he was a harsh king. He was so harsh that he felt bad about what he did in his later years, and that he abdicated the throne in 943 and then lived as a monk in a monastery, repenting for all the evil that he did. As I stated, under the reign of Eokid and Garrick, it was a lot of civil wars and raids. Donald, lots of raids from the Vikings. So Constantine, to make up for all that violence being done upon the Scots of Alba, he dealt it out harshly. Constantine allied with the Weimar Vikings, or anglicized the Ivarids. If you have watched my previous videos on Ivar the Boneless, the Ivarids were a well-established Viking clan in the Western Isles and in Northumbria for a time, along with some extensions into Dublin. Constantine allied with the Ivarids and with the Cumbrians and full-on attacked the Anglo-Saxons to the south in Bernicia in response to a past invasion that they had done northwards into Alba, while again dealing with the civil wars and with the Viking threat from elsewhere. Constantine made peace with the Vikings he knew to then deal with the other Vikings that were a threat to him, and to deal with the Anglo-Saxons that had invaded just a couple years before. So he married the daughter of Edulf, the Earl of Bernicia. Yeah. Funny enough, he would invade Bernicia using her claim of her father. And he had Kenneth MacAlpin, who died prematurely in 937, an unknown daughter, and would have Indulf MacAlpin, who later be king. That unknown daughter is the one that married Amleb, or Olaf, Ivarid, who was king of Dublin and Northumbria. And they would go on to have more children, part of the Alpinid Dynasty. And again, if you watched my previous video on the Ivarids, you can see the rest of this line. Olaf died in 941. Now, after Constantine II abdicated his throne because he had done such unspeakable things to the Anglo-Saxons and to the Viking invaders, he repented, lived in a monastery, and his cousin's son, Malcolm I, became the 9th King of Scots. Now, he continued the retaliation. He raided Northumbria in retaliation after Constantine had provoked the Anglo-Saxons for decades. So, it's a tit for tat, right? Malcolm raids Northumbria. Why? Because the Northumbrians attacked Constantine. Why? Because Constantine had attacked the Northumbrians. Why? Because the Northumbrians had attacked Donald. And it's back and forth in the land of Bernicia. the northernmost region of Northumbria, near the city of Bemberg. Malcolm died in battle against the Anglo-Saxons. He had two sons. He had Dubh, the Black Prince, and he had Kenneth II. Dubh, anglicized, is Duff, just so you guys are aware. But their children did not inherit. Again, it is because of the tanistry laws. In Gaelic succession, the next king must be an adult male of the family. So it's not like primogeniture, where the child of the previous king automatically becomes king. That back then led to a lot of problems because the fathers died young, died in battle, died of disease, whatnot. And the children were children. The heirs were 8 years old, 7 years old. You can't have a minor be king and have him be effective. You need already a well-established adult male of the family to then rule for the kingdom in his stead. And that's why the kings of Alba, kings of Scots, they jumped from cousin to cousin to cousin all the way down the family tree. So, after Malcolm, who was the 9th king of Scots, we jump back to Indulf MacAlpin. Now, this is where finally Alba begins expanding into the area of Lothian. Lothian is where Edinburgh is, where the current capital of Scotland is. They had made ground and pushed out the Anglo-Saxons and taken the contested land. Indulf had 3 children: Ealhcéd MacAlpin, Colin MacAlpin, and Amlab MacAlpin. Now, after his death in 962, we jump back to this line again. As I said, it jumps from cousin to cousin. Duff was the 11th king. He lived from about 928 to 967. He had a child who would be Kenneth III, and Don MacAlpin, King of Scots. Not much about Duff, except for Duff was killed by Colin. Colin was over here, son of Indulf. Colin was his cousin, obviously, and he usurped the throne. He was the 12th king of Scots. Now, a little backstory about this family and about him. Ealhcéd and Colin, right? As you can see, they both died the same year. They actually both died together in 971. Colin and Ealhcéd were killed by Rhyddic ap Dyfnwal, king of Strathclyde, in retaliation for having his daughter kidnapped and raped by Colin, the MacAlpin, king of Scots. In retaliation, Rhyddic trapped both of them in a great hall, trapped them inside, and burned the building down with them inside, killing them for raping his daughter. The king of Strathclyde, that king, Rhyddic ap Dyfnwal, was down this line of Strathclyde. Rhyddic of Dyfnwal, if I'm not mistaken, was Ealhcéd's grandson, which means that daughter was Ealhcéd's great-granddaughter, which Colin raped. So, yes, they're technically related, but far removed. So both of these brothers died in that burning great hall. And when they died, Colin's brother Amlab, or anglicized to Olaf, became King of Scots. Now, during the reign of Olaf, we have English sources that states, and I quote, "a time of dissension, trouble, sedition, and most unhappy times." During this time period, it was raid after raid. It was civil war between the two main branches of the family. Cousin killing cousin, killing cousin, back and forth, back and forth. Again, Dynasty rooted out some problems with minors and being inept and ineffective as a ruler and king, but it caused a lot of internal strife, a lot of civil wars between the branches of the family. And it was really picking up during this time period, especially with the branch coming down from Indolf and the branch coming down from Malcolm. The cousins were constantly killing each other, as you can see. Now, another thing also happened. Apparently, Olaf was not liked at all by the rest of the cousins, by the people, by everyone. He wasn't liked so much that it seems that he suffered, now this is a Latin term, damnatio memoriae, where he is completely wiped from the records of Scotland, wiped from the records of the Chronicle of the Kings of Alba, and all records. So he wasn't even listed as a king in Alba because they want to damn his memory. Luckily, we have Irish sources and English sources that say otherwise, that he was part of the line of kings. Now, after his death in 977, we move to the 14th king, who was Kenneth II. Kenneth II raided Cumbria and Northumbria and tried to change the succession laws of Dynasty. He saw the strife that it caused. Also, obviously, he wanted his own line to succeed in primogeniture. But he couldn't do all that. He couldn't do all that because he was killed by Lady Fenella of Angus, the daughter of the Mortimer of Angus, in response for the death of her son. So, some backstory. Kenneth II is starting to be threatened by the Mortimer and the power of the Mortimer of Angus. So he goes to Lady Fingola and tricks her son. They're hunting, by the way. They were in a hunting party. So they're out there in the woods. Tricks her son into going into this log cabin. They were apparently like resting for the afternoon or something. Goes into this log cabin and has him walk in first. In this log cabin, there's a booby trap set up with crossbows pointed at the door. He walks through and gets shot with multiple crossbows and dies. Now, the grieving mother, Lady Fenella, or like I said in Gaelic, Fingola is her name. She holds the grudge for so long, for so long, against Kenneth II. Now, she gets the idea to kill Kenneth II. She just doesn't know how. She conspires with the food taster of Kenneth II and gets the food taster on board. Poisons the food, or I don't know if it was poisoning the food or poisoning the spoon or something, but it was poison. Now, Lady Fenella was not alone in this conspiracy. She had backing and help from Kenneth's nephew, Kenneth III, who was a co-conspirator of Lady Fenella, and also from Constantine III, who was also another co-conspirator. Now, obviously, Constantine III and Kenneth III were far removed from the assassination because they put up this grieving mother to do it for them, but nonetheless, it was all planned together. So Kenneth II dies. Now, Kenneth II does have two children, Dungal MacAlpin, who died in 999, and Malcolm II MacAlpin, King of Scots, and he was the last MacAlpin king. So after Kenneth II, who was the 14th King of Scots, when he died of the poisoning, Constantine III became the 15th king. And as I said, he was a co-conspirator. And there was a civil war. Surprise, surprise. Again, Constantine III died in that civil war. And then you have Kenneth III MacAlpin, who became the next King of Scots. Now, Kenneth III, he began the invasion of Strathclyde to the southwest. Now, he never succeeded in finishing the invasion before his death, and he was killed in battle by his cousin, Malcolm II, who Kenneth killed his father, his uncle, his cousin's father. So obviously Malcolm was, a bit angry about that. So now, Malcolm II conquered the kingdom of Strathclyde and was finally incorporated into Scotland by the end of his reign. With Malcolm II, he had 3 daughters. All he had was daughters. But the marriages that they would marry into were very, very well put together. We have first Bethoc MacAlpin, anglicized to Beatrice, who married Crinan, who was the abbot of Dunkeld. Now, just because he's an abbot doesn't mean that he's a clergyman. You have to understand that back then, some abbots were laymen, meaning that they took help, that they, ran the abbot, they ran the monastery, they ran the lands, but they weren't themselves exactly clergymen. Also, a lot of priests back then and clergymen actually did marry and have children. That wasn't a rule for the Catholic Church until later on. Donata MacAlpin, who married Finlay, who was the Moray, and Olith MacAlpin, who married Sigurd the Stout. I cannot pronounce his last name. Lolverson, who was the 12th Jarl of Orkney. And their son would be Thorfinn the Mighty. Pretty sure he would be the 16th Earl of Orkney. If you want to find information about the Jarls of Orkney, you can look at my previous video that I've done on that entire family. So Malcolm made peace with the family of Moray and with the Vikings of Orkney. So he was secure to the north. And obviously he had conquered the south, so he was secure to north, to the south. And the west was, the Isles were too weak to pose any real threat to him by this point. Crinan and Beatrice, they had Duncan the first Dunkeld, King of Scots. And then to see the rest of his line, you could obviously look at my previous video on the Dunkeld family I have on my YouTube channel. Now, Finlaic, who was the Mortimer of Moray, he had a strong power base. And their son was Macbeth. Yes, that Macbeth. He would actually be King of Scots. So the way it went down was Malcolm II, MacAlpin, right? He was the last MacAlpin, King of Scots. He was the 17th MacAlpin. When he died, his grandson, Duncan, was young and powerful. He took over. He became King of Scots. Now, Duncan's children, he had 2 sons. They weren't yet established and powerful. So Duncan's cousin, Macbeth, took advantage and became King of Scots because he was already mature, an adult, and established with power and backing. Now, Macbeth married his cousin, Grauk MacAlpin. Now, obviously, as a second marriage, Grauk is the daughter of Boyd MacAlpin, who died in 1058, who is the son of Kenneth III, also another King of Scots. Kenneth III also had 2 other sons, Garrick and Swebney MacAlpin. No information is really known about Garrick. Swebney, we have some records that he went to Galloway and became a mercenary. So really what we're left with is Boyd and his daughter. His daughter married Gilad Colmain, Mortimer of Moray. And together they produced a child, Lulach Turbith. But Gilad Colmain, he died in 1032. He died young. So Grauk then married Gilad Colmain's cousin. Gilad Colmain, the Mortimer of Moray, is the nephew of Finlaic, the former Mortimer of Moray. So Grauk just basically married her husband's cousin, which by extension is also her cousin. If you can see the lines here and how they connect. Now, obviously, it's far away enough, but, in this time period, in this area of the world, endogamy is completely a thing. So Macbeth becomes the stepfather to Lulach. Macbeth, after his death in 1057, pushes, well, not him because he's dead, but his backers, the noblemen, the people who had backed Macbeth, then backed his stepson, Lulach, who was only king for 3 months. Like, Macbeth died in November, Lulach, I think, dies in February or something like that, was king for literally 3 to 4 months. Because by that point, Duncan's son, Malcolm II, had established his power hold. So, as you can read through here, after Malcolm II died, Duncan I became King of Scots. However, after his death, his children weren't yet strong enough to hold a kingdom, and there are other claimants through Donata. Macbeth became King of Scots. He reigned for 17 years, married his cousin's wife, became stepfather to Lulach, who reigned only for a few months before being assassinated by Malcolm III Dunkeld, the son of Duncan I. So Lulach was assassinated, killed. Malcolm Dunkeld becomes king, and then the reign of the Dunkelds begins. And they would reign for about, 300 to 400 years. I don't exactly remember off the top of my head, but they would reign until the Civil Wars, and then Robert the Bruce comes into the picture. So that is the MacAlpin Dynasty. And again, just to point out, this is the Kingdom of Dál Riata was first established by the Irish migrations. Then they were pushed eastward because of the Viking invasions in the Isles. Kingdom of Alba expanded, took over Moray, took over Lothian, took over Strathclyde, and then eventually would be, under the Dunkelds, take over the Isles and Caithness and Sutherland, establishing Scotland as we know today. And one last look at the regnal dates. The MacAlpins reigned from 843, starting with Kenneth I MacAlpin, going down to 1034, the 17th king, Malcolm II MacAlpin. And if you want to follow, check me out. This is my Reddit. This is my Facebook and my YouTube channel. That History Dude. Thank you. Bye.